Well, I just turned it on. We went live just because.
Well,
Yes.
I just checked on Twitter. Looks good. Let's go on YouTube.
Tweet out the link. Sweet.
Okay, sweet. We're live on everything. Good. Yeah. Another Friday.
Yes.
Which podcast is this? Is this at this point?
16.
16.
Yes. Good merging. Merge is
Man,
complete.
time has went so fast. I
I
don't
did
think.
not hear a lot of noise. I mean, I got all the newsletters about the merge, but not too much chitter chatter, you know? It was a
Yeah,
lot of chitter chatter last week about the merge and not much after. So,
I think I think a lot of folks were trying to manifest a lot of excitement, being the
yeah.
bear market and all. I think the whole hard fork thing was that whole thing. That the proof of work version was a whole thing. Obviously for us, it was a deadline that we were trying to hit. But yeah, I have a stronger memory of the London hard fork than this one. I think specifically, at least that one was just felt louder. Maybe it's just because it was a more bullish market. It felt
Nothing
louder.
weird happened, right? Did you see anything on like? Did you get any news about anything weird happening with proof of stake transition or not? It was pretty seamless, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think I guess the fact that there was no news was almost good news, right?
That's good.
Like
Yeah.
it just worked. It was smooth, and now the beauty now is it's actually particularly awesome. The blocks are like pretty much guaranteed, like finality, such that like you only have to wait every 11 seconds.
Oh,
And there's pretty
so
much always a block, like fairly consistently now. Whereas the mining, there was quite a big frequency of when a block was mined. So
when blocks get orphaned, is that like a problem with Ethereum? The same way
with
Bitcoin.
POS, I don't know if orphaning will happen anymore.
Okay.
I don't quite actually know the what actually goes on with
Yeah.
the consensus. Um, but yeah. So it looks good. I think there to go on a little tangent. I was even I think there was early concepts of a merge experience that we wanted to do that was going to play around with how block time becomes more stable post merge. So that could be interesting if your NFT had to reacted to the fact that before the merge it was erratic, the mining time was inconsistent, and then afterwards it's like every 11 seconds on the clock. Um, but there wasn't quite a great idea there. But um, I think there's still something to explore. The fact that the blocks are so consistent now.
What other kind of benefits we get? We get you said random number because of
Yes,
block
so we get proper random numbers now, technically. So uh,
name.
like random numbers, as in like the stakers don't dictate the random number in the sense that like the miners could have just chosen whatever difficulty that they wanted to set, and that
In
would
that block. Yeah.
effectively control your randomness as a content creator. We don't have that as a problem. The world got a little greener, less electricity being burnt. So
Someone was putting it at what 0.2% of the world's energy, which can't be right. That can't close to right at all.
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. But yeah, so it's I think it's all interesting. Let's see how stable it is. Hopefully, nothing cross our fingers goes wrong with the staking change. But given that it worked fine on all the other test networks, I'd be very surprised if it doesn't work now with mainnet. Um, and it looks like the proof of work chain Ethereum kind of just died out. Really didn't have a chance of survival. So it looks like the focus is just on
Yeah.
this this chain, right? This staking chain. So
I'm
um,
surprised Ethereum Classic is still kicking it as a token, but yeah.
they have the better meme, I think, if you want to do a POW
Yeah,
ETH competitive on the
I mean, the four coins are interesting. I mean, we don't want to talk too much about current events, but we move on to our merge project. But hard fork coins are just interesting in that aspect. So Ethereum Classic is the main one, and then Bitcoin Cash is like kind of another.
Yeah.
Right, like Bitcoin Cash, surprisingly, I see more and more pop up in sponsorships. Like they sponsored the number one grappler in the world, Gordon Ryan, right now. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how's that? Why? You know, like it doesn't make any sense.
Wait, what do you mean sponsor? Who's sponsoring it? Is
So like
there a
you look at his
nation?
shirt and it's fucking Bitcoin Cash. It's Bitcoin Cash right on there. You know, like doesn't make any sense.
Oh, well, it's not even like Bitcoin Cash Foundation. It's just cash,
Bitcoin
straight
Cash.
cash. Okay.
Bitcoin.
I
Well,
always wondered, like,
I assume Bitcoin.com sponsors it. They're the main
right?
main
Okay,
backer
that
of
makes sense.
Bitcoin Cash. Um, yeah,
That's interesting. Then
I wonder if
did
there
it?
is a kind of meme we can make on Ethereum Classic. That might be an interesting tangent for us to think about.
That would
Um,
be. That would be.
in
I
relation to
mean,
the now.
it'd be interesting if we do something that like is dependent to how badly you were impacted by the DAO hack. Um,
Well,
but then that's maybe a little that may just be too dating now
Well, the
with the classic.
philosophy is just completely day and night now, right? Just the whole landscape is completely day and night between that doubt, the landscape of what people used to think about how chain and protocol should be upgraded at that time versus
Yeah,
now, right? It's basically completely different. So
that's fair. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I there's like this whole long history of why classic came to be, and
I mean,
beyond
do you think
not
that's
trying to
interesting,
delve
right?
into it.
Like the way that Bitcoin upgrades is basically like it's just developers shouting into the ether, putting their shit on GitHub and calling and seeing like, all right, which
Yeah.
one do miners eventually want? But now it's pretty much we rely on Big Daddy to come up with the answer, the question and the
Yeah.
answer, and then we just like, and then
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of like default governance.
yeah,
I
interesting.
mean, that's comes with the complexity, right? With our world,
Yeah,
eventually, only a few people actually knows what's actually going on, and everybody else is just like, "Woo, U.S. dollar goes up," right?
yeah. I still very much enjoy seeing the whenever a new Bitcoin Core version comes out, the discussion of like, what features have been added, like what makes sense, what
Mhm.
doesn't make sense, like yeah, yeah, because they did do stupid stuff. I mean, it's not like they didn't, right? They had a whole feature called replace by fee, which basically means you can send a transaction and change your miner fee after the fact. Uh,
Oh,
like
wow.
you can make it lower.
What?
I mean, it would make sense if you could only make it higher, but you can make it
But you can
lower.
make it lower. That's so
Yeah,
weird.
yeah,
Well, okay, that's yeah. That sounds very counterintuitive in my Ethereum mind. Um, huh.
yeah.
That's so weird. Yeah.
Anyway,
Uh,
I guess we can move on to
yeah.
mer-
Let's chat mana. Again, if for any folks, we do these podcasts once a week around now, plus or minus. We start a little later, sometimes a little earlier, but this is kind of our obligation and opportunity to just kind of publicly almost have an internal meeting and talk about what's on our minds and also communicate with the community. So, get your feedback in on the actual grounds during ground zero, where we're actually building the very things uh, that you may have an interest in. So, yeah, before we delve too deep, I can just verbally just highlight what is going to be going on for the next month or two for post merge uh, Epic's merge. So what our primary goal now is that after we introduce Mana, now let's start selling and actually producing the world that we envisioned with Mana before the merge. And we wanted to make it feel uh, what's the best way to say it? Gamey in the right ways, but just something fun. I think that's just the most abstract way or the generalized way I can say it. It's going to be something that we really want to make that is fun. So with that in mind, the Epic's merge NFT being a live service NFT now, we're going to be incrementally,
I mean, this is our
adding new
opportunity to
features.
balls to the wall, try out weird stuff, try to push
Yeah,
the. I mean,
exactly.
we wanted we talked about it many times on the podcast, but the architecture of the project is open ended, so it requires us to physically explore what that means, and this is our
Yeah,
opportunity. And then we're gonna
yeah,
show you guys what we think our steps are gonna look like, and we're gonna obviously try our best to make it fun, and it will be fun and exciting. So I think it's important for I think the community to understand our frame of mind, as in like if you go into it thinking that like this project's all figured out, it's got a roadmap, and we're just not explaining it correctly. That's not exactly what's going on. That's not what's going on. So.
yeah. I mean, I feel like for some projects that do have roadmaps, I think it's a reflection that they've kind of defined so much what they can't do.
Yes, yes,
So like the roadmap is almost like
they're
a
locked in.
implication of like what's left. So they
Yeah.
sequence it into a timeline.
Well, they also are not built the way we're built, or the project and built the way they work.
Sure.
Right? So,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's really operated like the way we're going to operate this live service type of thing, uh,
Yeah.
for the most
Yeah,
part.
and we've always kind of worked with a kind of standpoint that the space being so fast moving, fast paced, it's really hard to make a call on what comes up in the future. So we really play by kind of the moment and figure out as we go what the technology that is powering this can enable and what can't it enable and what are interesting ideas in general. But yeah, so within hopefully next week, we'll start. If you guys haven't seen the tweet already, um, we're showing it. We already shown a preview of what generally your mana will visualize as on your NFT. If you have a lot of mana, you'll see a lot of these kind of like wispy, pixelated lines of like energy flowing around it. If you have less mana, obviously you would see a little bit less of the animation going being played. Um, and so that's going to be like a really subtle way to kind of visually note that your statue has a lot of energy or less energy. So that's going to be coming up hopefully next week. And that kind of will start to set the presence that this NFT is meant to be upgraded onwards, that we will introduce interesting new ways to experience your NFT moving forward.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I think we're going to be doing the transmutation ritual, right? We're going to create the first ritual that allows you to use your mana to get something done. So we're going to allow you to effectively kind of reskin your statue, recolor it in a way that could be more personal, that could be more rare looking or just intriguing and a little bit more unique. So that's going to be a really interesting experience and allows you to start using your mana to do actions around the
A lot of,
universe.
yeah, so a big focus for us is basically kind of making the statues come to life and making them
Yeah.
personalized through these rituals. So the visual effect is the first version of that. That's the transmutation ritual, and then we're gonna build layers on top of that. Right? We still have a lot of room to work with. We
Yeah.
still the titles are just statue number or whatever. Right? So
Yeah.
um, that can be exciting, and the way
Yeah.
we build
And,
is gonna.
I think even like I think there's been so many versions of like the actual animations of the mana lines. Some were a lot more, would require a lot more pixels, is the best way to say it. But I think we went really conservative in hopes that we save more pixels for the future for cooler other stuff that can add to your statue experience and really make it a living experience. So that's going to be really exciting. And then post transmutation, I think once people have a demand to use mana, we're going to start unveiling the channeling ritual. So now you can move your mana around your statues to use it for the transmutation ritual. So that's going to be kind of like a way to kind of really make this feel like a game where you're actually like micromanaging or macro managing your statue portfolio. And then after that, I think that's where we're really going to mark the future of the project is what we kind of describe as the Great Decay. And the Great Decay will be a deflationary mechanic that will slowly kind of like, if you leave a statue completely dormant and you just don't touch it for years, it will eventually run to zero. It's mana, because we want to create an incentive for people to be using it, for us to be building more rituals, and three, to create a nice, interesting like coordination where the whole community has to work together to preserve the story of mana, where mana isn't just this perpetual force within the project, which I think is a nice reflection of not all things are really permanent, which is I think cool. So we're gonna have, so that's kind of the big four I think we have planned. And the other things that we kind of soft promised that is we're thinking really hard about what comes after the decay, right? What is interesting ritual designs that requires coordination, that requires you to work together or work against each other. How do we build it in a way that has fun stories to tell? How do we
Multiplayer.
build it in a way there's so many interesting ideas that I think we're sometimes even overwhelmed by like what we can and can't do, but also realizing at least I'm trying to take on the page that there's probably a lot of things that we just need time to kind of explore further before we commit to a specific ritual or game to be played. But pretty much from here up to the Great Decay, one way or another, we have already have built some stuff for each stage. It's just kind of like, where are they within the, I guess, completion, Kanban board, if you will, or where how close are they to finishing? And so obviously the mana like visual animations is really close, and transmutation ritual is a little further out from completion. Channeling protocol wise, it's done. The Great Decay is already done. It's just we have to activate these features, and visualize it and communicate it. So I personally feel really bullish that we can get to the next stage of this project relatively soon, like really soon. And we're being conservative right now about our estimates of timeline, just
I
for our
mean,
own sanity, right?
yeah. I mean, but so just so everyone's clear, right? I mean, we have nothing else to do so work on this, quite literally. If anyone's, I don't know what people are thinking, but yeah, this is our thing for. So I think actually we'll probably bang things out week to week pretty quickly. I mean, we put out the visual preview for just a base state of mana.
Yep.
Uh, Transmutation, kind of working out the kinks of UI and then how that will,
Yeah.
all the possibilities. I think that will be very interesting how that will be received, and then from there, just layers and layers of pushing our own, trying to see what would make sense for us to build out. That will
Yeah.
be interesting. But I think if we do this right, we'll get some good attention, right? So, I do you have good examples of other types of projects that are working with these types of mechanics in any regard, even if it's like off-chain stuff? So, Cheese Wizards, I'm going to look at very closely. We just talked about that before the podcast.
I would wager an argument that the Polygon world and the L2 worlds has a lot more of a vibrant kind of
Oh,
interactivity
okay.
experience. Uh, why is that name escaping my head? What is
Probably.
that thing? What is that one that looks like Pokemon from Axie Infinity? Obviously, is one of the bigger examples.
Yes.
Um, um, but yeah, so I think there's a lot of present cases. I think mainnet is probably not the best space for examples. Um, but within the capacity of the other L2s, I think there's some interesting things. But I do think a lot of folks are still being very GameFi about their design language and their focus. I think we're trying to find that strike that balance where it has gamey elements, but pulled off in a way that is that plays right to the qualities of the NFT. So
Yeah.
yeah. But like there's I've been like like we can kind of like leave the rest of the podcast almost as like a just like an internal just like spitball session. But like like one of our earliest iterations of the statues, we wanted to do like moss or like effectively weathering effects on the statue, and that never
Right.
went. That never we never did it, but that's still
Right.
something on the table. It would be really cool if like even if your statue has like graffiti sprayed onto it or something, and that could be a whole story to tell or whatever. Visually, there's quite a few things to explore. We can switch out the pedestals.
Even
The background is kind
actual
of fair game.
weathering
Um,
effects, like actual weather effects, are
yeah,
possible.
yeah. I think it would be really cool if we have like a foreground. If
Right?
it's like the fall, you'll see like leaves, spring, cherry blossoms, rain, or whatever, or God rays. I think we wanted to do God rays really badly, but that didn't kind of we didn't have the time to do it before. So there's a lot of interesting things that could just make your statue feel like it's really placed in a world, which I think not a lot of other kind of PFP style projects do well because it's usually a flat background and it's just like a profile picture pretty much. Um,
Yeah,
so
I kind of want this to be in some aspects the way Control was for Remedy, as setting like a new chapter for the studio, right? And like
yeah,
they're kind of laying out like, all right, this is kind of like very we're thinking of these things, we're laying out the universe, like our capabilities of what's possible, but
yeah,
um, and I think that's what we should that's what we can do, and then get people really excited and bought in for what's to come too. So I know I
yeah,
keep saying that what's to come, but that is a critical part, I think, for the community to understand that we're always thinking about we're thinking about what's happening now, but we're also thinking about what's coming next. Because
yeah,
not just like, all right, we're gonna try to make as much money off one thing and then move on, or and then walk away, right? That's not what's happening here. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that we're as a studio, we've always been pretty open minded about what we do next.
yes, yes.
So we let that be dictated by the whims of intellectualism and creativity and whatever. But yeah, yeah. I mean, like I think yeah, like with even post the Great Decay mana future, it's just gonna be really weird and really interesting, and quirky. Um, yeah, it's really it's like I keep on going. Like I feel like I even myself kind of need to take a step back about the whole mana thing because I'm like because I know quite literally every line of code that makes mana, and also writing the RCE, the system that makes the actual visuals. I think of it in a very literal way where I'm like, well, I know there's 13 layers of images. I know there's attributes. I know there's mana is a number, and you can manipulate this number. I think there's a little bit more ethereal ways to think about mana and what it can do, then I think where my mind is a little bit more stuck in the literal, where it's like I can very easily quantify what is mana to me because it's which contracts, what visuals. Um,
You're seeing. So what do you say? Well, what?
I'm just saying that for me is like I think I'm taking a very literal approach where I think there's a lot more to be thought of if you or just think of it in more of an abstract. Like this is an interesting concept that can be consumptive, whatever, right? But like it's almost a soft currency of this world, right? And if you
Yeah,
can think of it less of like, oh, it's like because in my mind it's
an
four
attribute.
smart contracts and an
Yeah,
attribute, right? Like
yeah.
I have a very literal
Okay.
understanding of it, but
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think it's my way of almost telling myself that like there's still some more time to be had.
But
Um,
at abstract level, it's like experience points sort of on a character or any kind of
yeah,
spend type of thing. The same way
yeah,
you spend on skill trees is like that kind of
yeah,
spend.
yeah, yeah. That's actually a great way to kind of think of it. Like yeah, spending on a skill tree,
And you
resource
should
being.
consider gaming more. You know, the PlayStation 5 is changing.
I have an Xbox right behind my laptop.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I think post merge and having having some more free time, I'm
We,
gonna be.
we are the game industry right now is in an interesting phase, right? We're in a remake era, or remaster remake era of games.
Yeah,
There's no new
yeah,
games coming out, just remasters and remakes, right? And so that is like interesting. Just looking at the mechanics of like old games like Resident Evil, which is like just small quirks to it that would not be present in a game these days, but are interesting. Just like I can give you a small example, right? In Resident Evil, uh, every time you pick up an item, you have to put it into your inventory, and you have limited slots in your inventory.
Sure.
Which some games have limited slots, but not to a very level. But let's say you get ammo, you pick 2 ammos, you have to combine the ammos to like stack the number of bullets, and there's a limit to how much you can stack, you know. But you can also discover weird things, like if you get a green herb and a red herb and you combine them, then you make like a more powerful health boost, you know. And you wouldn't know that unless you click the combine menu and then try to combine it with something, you know.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, and then you don't also
Which
when you
Resident
get
Evil is this specifically?
it's two,
Two.
yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
2 and 3 are both like this. And same thing. It's like if you discover a key, you don't necessarily know what lock it goes to. Yeah, so
I think we need to. Yeah, I think there's a strong opportunity we can bring that energy back with
yeah. The
like our design of NFTs.
designs of earlier games are actually very interesting, and Apple.
And I feel like they have that playability where it's not like a. I feel like games right now are either massive multiplayer systems or walking simulators or a movie, but you have to play the movie as in
Yeah,
with a controller,
yeah.
right? Like, and I do kind of reminisce on those games where it just feels kind of like you go into an arcade and you know
It's like they don't
figuring every
expect
little
it,
thing out.
right? It's like they're relying very much on essentially the social pressure of figuring out the game, right? It's like everyone's talking
And
about
I
the game.
feel like
It's
I don't know if you agree with me here, but I feel like older games assumed you were smarter.
yeah, yes.
Like they didn't think of you as that you
Yeah,
literally is like
and it makes sense if you think about it because again, like they're game designers, they're nerds just like
yeah
us. It's like
yeah
they're not thinking like AAA, especially at that time. Like pipeline, like product management is like this is this like intuitive for the user or something. Like that was not the goal, right?
yeah
So I think very much we have to revisit that type of mindset and look at that. And is it that's why I brought it up. Is it we're in an interesting era now of remakes and remasters, people looking at those kind of mechanics again. So
yeah. And to bring it back to NFTs, I've been really thinking a lot about like motivation and incentive design with NFTs. Where if we're gonna build things that demand a certain level of sophistication or engagement, um, NFTs have such an interesting double-edged sword, right? Like, if you make the engagement directly enable your NFT to be valued more, that's like a really, really good incentive mechanism that modern games may not necessitate to have. But then the double-edged sword becomes if it's too good of an incentive, people will bot the ever living hell out of it and become too sophisticated, making rendering the system just about making money. Where I think you have to find that balance where it's not just people farming for airdrops effectively or farming to make their NFT more valuable through a game like or arcadey experience. But then you can't just make it, just have no incentives, or else nobody will take the time to learn how to play your interactive NFT or whatever, or rituals in our case. Um, so
yeah, but I mean, we are working. It's an uphill battle, right? Because every operation has a cost, and so
yeah,
right. So the thing about like we do need to think native to the environment, right? And then right
yeah.
now, everything it's been proven time and again the most native thing to blockchain is speculation and making more money. So uh, how like how we translate that to a mechanic, a game mechanic that's
I
also has
mean,
yeah.
would you argue the boost ritual did a little bit of that? I wouldn't
Yes,
say it
the
was the
boost.
right.
That's what I'm saying. The boost falls into that category pretty cleanly, I think. But going
Right.
forward, you have to keep that same level of energy and face value, like
Yeah.
sentiment. Yeah. So
Yeah, I was, I one of my very earliest concepts, and maybe something we actually can do here would be really interesting. One of the things I was conceiving as an idea pre-studio was what I call the fine wine concept, where like an NFT has to age itself based on how many people it transferred to.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
It would be interesting if the statue has to be aged in a way
yeah, flips.
through
Yeah.
ownership transfers.
But that
Obviously
again,
to implement that has some complexities now,
right?
but
So always thinking about the botted aspect of something is annoying. But
people will ever living hell bought the transfer system to get age it. But then it's almost like in my eyes, it's almost like I don't know, just like you can either age a bottle by just putting it in a dry area, or no, I don't understand
I
alcohol
mean,
enough to
we can
inform.
make much more sophisticated aging mechanisms that are not based on transfer, right? We can be like, all right,
Yeah,
we
exactly.
and it has to pass 30, like 100 blocks or whatever, and then acts like and it unlocks,
Yeah, yeah,
like shit
yeah,
like
and
that.
it can be really active. It can be literally live. The moment you refresh, it pulls the latest version of your aged quality. Um, and yeah, so there's this. Yeah, so that's a really interesting possible direction, right? They are statues. They are meant to reflect a time, right? And I think when people think of statues, they also can think of the texture of it. So that could be really interesting how we play into that.
We did a collab with the What's a Pigeons project, and then there's like bird shit
Oh,
on
the name Stapleverse.
Stapleverse. Yeah, that'd be hilarious. There's a lot of pigeons in this area. I hate it.
That'd be funny. That'd be funny if like there's like yeah, pigeon drops on the
Yeah.
statues and just that
Um. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then like people have been asking us about burning, or like very,
We. I
I
mean, yeah.
guess.
Yeah. I mean, we might as well mention it. Like, we'll see what the reception in Discord is, but like, um, we can think through battle like system, cheese wizard like systems. And in fact, we're big fans of cheese wizards overall as a concept. Um,
Which
so
I
I mean,
think,
yeah,
to take a step back, for
yeah,
folks that don't know what Cheese Wizard is, they were made by the guys who made
Crypto
Crypto
Kitties,
Kitties, Dapper Labs now.
NBA
Uh,
Top, and all that stuff. So
yeah, so between the bear markets of the ICO and then
it
now
was fair
they made
market.
a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
They made something called Cheese Wizards, and it was like I think they pitched it almost as like a battle royale NFT experience. I don't
yeah.
quite remember what it was. It was like this kind of like web app game
Really
experience, and it
high,
was
hi-fi. Yeah, really
yeah,
nice.
really well made. I think it certainly would have done well in our current market, in the past bull market a year ago or half a year ago. But unfortunately, it came in a time where nobody cared.
It
Um,
would have been. It would have gone bananas, probably, possibly with people doing crazy gas transactions too. Because I think it was
mm,
really expensive compute, right? Whatever they're doing.
it was relatively expensive, yeah, and I think that's was their one of the bigger impulses to have to go to their own blockchain.
Yeah,
Um, but like I feel like every freaking NFT project is gonna have to go through that growing pain. Gods Unchained was used to be on mainnet. I think they're on their own chain that they call something. I don't remember what they call it. Um,
chained. We're not. We're
yeah,
unchained anymore. Fully chained.
yeah, that's actually a pretty good name. um, which is like actually now to think of it, it's pretty ironic. God's Unchained, but
God's
now it's in a
unchained.
weird irony. It's very chained to the very own proprietary software.
Yeah,
Um, um, yeah, so they literally just became a game, like a traditional game, but AWS servers doing more work than they should do because it's a
yeah.
blockchain, in quotes. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, like it. I do think, not to say that we will do something actually like action on this, but like if we can actually figure out how to compute or do actions on the L2 side and have it served on the L1, you can imagine what the doors that can open up are, right? Like we can do the rituals on L2, and then that gets us the gas environment, and L1 just has to call L2.
The only problem
Um,
is that that would only work for metadata and visual comp. Anything that's related to metadata. It doesn't work for anything that's like a mechanic. Like if I
well, if
need,
the
I want
metadata is reacting to to mechanical state, the mechanical state would just have to be on an L2 as well, right? If you know what I mean here. Where if So that's our problem, is because
Like, I
Mana is
can't.
on mainnet.
I wouldn't be able to do like, all right, let's say we have some like a cheese wizards battle on Polygon. Like, I wouldn't be able to communicate the result of that to L1 and then have it written.
The only way that would be communicated is through the metadata. I think that's what you were implying earlier. Which is that enough?
I guess I'm not.
If you're not doing a burn or a mint
It
or a
feels like
transfer,
it
that's
feels like for a
enough,
design that
right?
requires L2, you have the main tokens on L1, but you do everything else on L2 basically. You do all like the mechanics, all the metadata composition, maybe like some of the fancy stuff, metadata
Yeah.
composition on L2. So it seems like it would be pretty binary. It's like, all right, you gotta know what you want on L1 and then do the rest on L2, right? Type of design.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, you have to kind of build it from the beginning that this is
Yeah.
case. And again, I don't even know it's fully possible. I've asked around if it's possible to have such a cross-chain metadata experience. My understanding, it's theoretically possible, but somebody has to prove it. And if I have some time, maybe I'll try to see if it does. But if it does work, that could be really wild, where you get the economic benefits of one place, but then you get the
So even on
computation
something
benefits of
like
another.
optimism, not even like a small little. There's no way to communicate back and forth between the roll
There
up.
is there is a communication bridge for optimism and arbitrum. Well, I mean, they all do, hence L2. But it depends on how the bridges are designed. Some bridges, I think they're pretty easy to actually just like send an ETH call over to that L2 and wait for its response. Some are
Really?
less so.
Okay.
Again, it's by design, but like they all tell me that it's possible, but I don't. It's only possible until I see it with my own eyes. Where you make you have a mainnet function that just uses a bridge to send a message to an L2 and then pick a response over. But then like in my eyes, it's like, how in the heck are you? That sounds like an asynchronous action. You know what I mean? Right? Like
Yeah,
that's
you
it
can
sounds
do
like you
that.
have to do a fetch request
Yeah,
cycle, but then like EVM is a synchronous world,
it's
so
that's what I'm saying, right? It sounds like the benefits of L2 can really only be leveraged when you're at simulated call level, not anything from the
well,
Solidity.
yeah, it has to be only sim. Like it pretty much is the token URI function is where it's
That's
exploited.
all you can do. You can't really do
But
anything.
again, like the better way to solve this freaking problem is if freaking OpenSea gives us that kind of support, right? Where they just say, hey, you don't have to figure this bridge stuff. You just have to point us to which chain ID, which address, and what function to call, and we'll handle the rest. Um, and we'll do the work for you and make that ETH call on your behalf. Um, that would be amazing because they already do that for IPFS, for 𝖌𝖊𝖗. What's stopping them from doing that with Polygon, with Optimism, with Arbitrum? Um, so if they can do that, I mean that's a main blocker. But if I think that happens, I think for one, I think NFT designs can get just so much more expressive. And two, I think as collectors we can start to demand for better NFTs. Period. Where I think if you were to say right now to any like big collections, like, hey, I want an NFT that has XYZ, I think most collections will just tell you like, well, crap, we can't do it because it's an IPFS static project, right? But I think if we can open those doors, it's like, well, there really isn't an excuse beyond just is this something that is it that you're interested in giving to your community, right? But we're not there yet. We'll get there soon enough. But
You know what I was thinking
uh,
about? I was thinking of, well, I was playing Resident Evil, right? And I was thinking about, I was like, wonder what the first like horror game on
would Doom be qualified as a horror game? No,
kind
right? The
of
original Doom.
it is, yeah, but it's more of a shooter. I mean, Resident Evil is a shooter too. Doom's an action game, right? Kind of
Yeah,
mostly.
I mean at least I mean
Yeah,
for us now the game doesn't look scary because it's
yeah,
the lighting and everything wasn't isn't what we expect. But
yeah.
what people in the beginning things like, oh crap.
Yeah. Well, Resident Evil was made to be scary because of the limited ammo and like
Well,
you can kill everything. You
so
gotta
I would ask you is if you were to play Resident Evil 2 right now, would that game feel scary to you right now?
yeah, it is still. I get scared easily
So
off
that's
game.
so I guess playing Doom now, you wouldn't feel scary.
No, no, because it's
So
an
it's not
action.
a scary game.
Yeah, it's an action game, right? Because
Okay, fair.
what parts of it make it scary is one, the atmosphere, environment. That's
The
not
world
the
design to an
that's
extent.
not even really the scariest part. The scariest part is the mechanics of the gameplay of like if you have like very limited resources basically. It's not a shooter, it's not optimized for you. There's not just like ammo everywhere and you can just kill things easily, right? It's like in the zombies in this game's like you can shoot them and they'll still bite you after like a couple seconds and shit like that. And like you're gonna
Mm,
run out of ammo if you try to kill everything. So you gotta run. And in Resident Evil 3, that was a major jump to a character to a they introduced a supernatural character that can't be killed really, so you can only run.
like a villain or like a unit type?
Villain.
Villain, okay.
So it's a
Like
specific
there's not like five versions of them
no,
that
no,
can just
no, no.
spawn.
Yeah, just one of
Okay.
them. Just one of them, and he comes
Sure.
like randomly, and then you have to just run, you know. And so they introduced that as like a you can see like an iterative mechanic, right? They're introducing. So I was thinking about it's like okay, horror, the distilling the concept of horror is difficult, but it actually doesn't take that much. It's basically mostly about limited resources and some kind of cost to things happening, right? So
Hmm.
because the way
Yeah. Well,
save works in Resident Evil is like you have to go back to your location and save. It's like an old fashioned game, right? It's not like a modern
oh,
save where it's like you die, you just come
right,
back
right.
to the nearest checkpoint. Yeah.
Hmm. I mean, like this is interesting to me because it's like for me, like I don't, I just frankly don't enjoy horror content at all. Like my mind is just too hyperactive
Yeah, no,
for
I
me
mean
to.
for me it's hard to play. Like I have to work through like it's like every little thing is painful to play.
Yeah, yeah. But I feel like there's a quality of like directorialness. I feel that these games have where they know what emotion they're trying to get you to feel,
Yeah, yeah,
and they're
and that's why
working towards that.
it is a very Japanese genre because of that, right? Or yeah, I
To an
think so.
extent, yeah. So
Uh,
I want to ask the question here is how would you make a horror NFT?
So yeah, that's the question. I was trying to think through it, right? So like the core things is the loss, that element of loss that has to be meaningful to something, or it has to bite, but it still wants you to like, all right, I'm gonna try again, you know, type of thing. So there's two ways to do that. I mean, the worst way to do it is like the burning the token. That's like the game over, you're done. But decrementing some value, that's the easy way to do it. That's always all games do that, right? It's like you die, you lose something
Sure.
and decrement some value. Um, that's one. That's just losing in general. That's not a horror thing. And then I don't know. I would have to like maybe this is where we can start thinking about like really mixing the idea of like the on-chainness, but also with off-chain content that
Yeah. Yeah.
unlocks something on-chain. You know, potentially.
Yeah, because I think horror is a lot more about the ambience than about like technical design,
Yes.
right? Even though technical design is a pivotal part of good horror games, but like usually the fact that it's darker games, like visually just darker games,
So
lighting is a lot more.
Reaper may turn into that type of.
Oh, that would be cool.
That would make a lot of sense too. Actually, I think in terms of like you can create that atmosphere and puzzles actually are a good way to introduce horror because like I said like if we're relying heavily on atmospheric and off-chain content you can talk about a bunch of weird spooky shit, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I think we're gonna have a few more internal conversations about this. I think that would
yeah,
be great for the Reaper concept. That if it was to become a more of a horror genre, I think that just is such a fun challenge.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
um,
It provides a reason for why am I making these
right,
long
right, exactly.
puzzles, right? So yeah,
Hmm. I know. Have we ever? We'll keep the conversation for
yeah, yeah.
Reaper's future, but I do like that. I do think that I feel like we'll learn a lot if we do a horror thing like that because we'll learn a lot more about what
Atmosphere.
makes an NFT beyond the very 721 contract that that exists, and the OpenSea webpage and the
Yeah.
Twitter, right?
And I mean, theoretically, like a lot of the same simple technicalities of Reapers are still in place. Like, all right, it's not that you have 721 plus signature system, right?
Yeah.
As long as you have that, it's like it's not much. Like you said, horror doesn't rely on technicalities. It's much more about configuration and sequencing. So
Oh shit! I guess if people know we're gonna do something like that, they'll know where it started. um, but I just find that really intriguing. Where like the NFT sure it resides on the blockchain, but like its actual meaning almost resides in your like
yes,
emotional slash like paranoia slash imagination of what is actually going on, the horror that it can create. I feel like in a weird, ironic way where people are always saying like NFTs are just like data pointers, right click save. You can't right click save that
yeah,
emotional state,
you know,
right? That you would feel from a horror experience. If we can make that
I mean,
something correlated to an
the
NFT,
way
that
you
would be
said
fun.
it is exactly why we're doing this, right? It's because we never thought
Right.
we're chasing that, or we're going to continue to keep trying to do that, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
the art
Um,
art is not the thing itself; is it's the relationship between the thing and the viewer.
yeah,
And
exactly. 100%. Right.
um, yeah,
And I think like Epic's merge is kind of probably the more traditionalist route where it's more of an exploration of the capabilities, where I think there's going to be certainly future projects that lean into the directorial control than more of the technical control, right? I
yes,
think what you're implying with this horror genre would imply that specific, more less technical, more directorial kind of a NFT experience, which I just find all kinds of exciting. Where I think I would argue our prior IPs, both London and Hash, were more poetic experiences where like everything was mechanically simple. It wasn't even technically complex. It wasn't really directorially controlled by us. It was just like an open-ended enough game that people played. It was like the equivalent of an open world game that we made, where I think now we're effectively live servicing something, and I think it'd be cool to have something that is just like, nope, this is kind of like you're playing through an experience that we built versus something you manifested through our um, tools that we gave you, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. But I mean, again, like I mean, we knew this stuff, but at the same time, I think everything we wouldn't have done it right until this moment, actually, because we needed to know that breaking things up into this kind of live service, like weekly thought, like or bi-weekly, or pretty much like every 2 weeks we have to put out something, right? Like thought process is a much better way to architect things and then even approach the
yeah,
directorialness of it, right? Because I was
yeah,
thinking that's like, I mean, in reality, if you're shooting a movie, it's not like they're sitting at a table and just thinking through every single thing that's going to happen. Like, that's what they get, right? It's like no, it's
yeah,
like there's a bunch of shit that happens on set, day to day. I mean, they have to deal with all kinds of things, like, and then you deal with it in the editing room, basically, right?
yeah,
It's like, oh,
yeah.
I didn't even know that was happening, and then you're like, oh shit, okay, let's use that, and
I have a huge fondness now to watch directorial cuts or like a
yeah,
commentary on movies.
yes, yes,
One of the things that really stands out to me was I was watching the John Wick 2 uh,
yeah,
um, commentary. And if you
yeah,
remember in that movie, there's like a stair scene where they're like fighting on the stairs. They're
yeah,
like falling over each other.
yeah.
The director was like, "This wasn't part of the script. We just like saw the stairs, and he was like, we need to throw two people down the stairs. We got to do it." And then they're like, and they just planned around it with their team, and made an awesome scene, right? And I like that quality of creativity where you're like, this wasn't part of our grand design. This was part of the creative spirit, and you surrounded yourself with the team to enable it, right?
But the
Um,
analogy works really well. It's like we just need to treat like every 2 weeks. It's like we're on set. Let's just see what happens, and
yeah,
then right.
yeah, and then hopefully that people will understand that's why we don't we're not given a roadmap further beyond than what we already know is halfway done. Um, we want that to come. We want it almost to come to us, right? As we experience it, on the side of the creators, and hopefully also as also as one of its users. So
Yeah, I mean, if anybody is interested, it's like Vanity Fair puts out lots of every new release. They have the director doing commentary on the scene or two.
yeah,
I think those are immensely valuable in terms of understanding like how these complex things are actually created, right? And then we can take
And I always
analysis.
took away from them. There's like quality of whimsicality to it.
Yes,
Like
yes.
yeah, I think a lot of folks think these are like controlling experiences to make a movie, but they're like, yeah, like the
Even
actor just
obvious,
decided.
yeah. You watch 𝖒𝖊𝖗𝖊𝖐's commentary on our new movie. What's it called? Like, Don't Worry, Darling, or whatever. Just anyway, like, there's
No, I don't even know it's a movie.
they're cutting between two different scenes, and like one scene, the fireplace is clean. There's nothing behind it, and then
Sure.
very there's like smoke and like and debris
Right.
basically around the fireplace. That would be a classic mistake for any editor, right? But she left it in because she was like, "All right, I like that effect."
Yeah, and that's one of the big things where I feel like a lot of NFTs analysis are missing out on sometimes. It's fine to just like it.
Yeah,
Right? Like it's fine to just like a mechanic, even though it's or fine to like an NFT. It's fine to do it. Like it's I feel like
doesn't
there's too much technical analysis sometimes, or like there's what IP rights, the floor price. It's like if you like it, you like it. It's like sometimes it's as simple as that, right? Like,
exactly.
um, and I think sometimes with our works as a studio, we create stuff and they come out the door, and the best answer we can give to why it exists, on the final version, it's like we liked it. um, I think I think London's visuals and its like names was quite kind of like honestly that whole process was just like one I like it after another until it completed. So that was for me very fun to make. Um, and I think this mana thing to an extent, I think we'll look at it in retrospection. It's going to be that kind of like chipping towards whatever direction we want to go to, and I think when we originally were conceiving the mana idea and what the original version of it just was like, well, that sounds just really exciting. And here we are, right? I was actually personally very intrigued by the fact that it wasn't because I think the person who pitched it to me, with being the artist, he doesn't, quite honestly, operate within our crypto world all the time. So everything is not a token.
Yeah,
So he conceived this whole mana concept without thinking it could be an ERC20. So he was telling it to me as if it's a character stat.
yeah, yeah.
And I was arguing against him. It's like, why is it not an ERC20?
Right, SC20.
Right. And then after like a few minutes, I was like, oh God, you're right. You're right. Like this is actually a much more creatively empowering way to do this. By not just freaking airdropping people something that would dump in an hour, right? Like it was restraining, but in a way that just felt very open. And I got very excited after
It's
that.
actually funny to think about. There's a lot of blind sides that you probably have just from being in this in crypto. Well, I mean, both of us, right? Crypto
Right.
land.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I think that's where I also feel right now about rituals. It's the same way. It's just like I know exactly how everything is made, but I feel like I need to take a step back and be like, oh wait, this is cool. Now let's think about the technicals. Whereas I think I'm conceiving a lot of things from the technicals first, out to its how can we go to market with an interesting concept around this technical design and feature. But I don't know. I think it's a reflection of state of mind right now because I think we conceived the model only a few weeks ago. Spent the last week laying a lot of infrastructure so we could have this conversation effectively. And now we're going to execute on building on top of this infrastructure the things that we do have planned, and then afterwards we'll, yeah, do what we do best. So yeah.
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
think
well,
a lot of people want to ask us is like, how should I speculate on mana? Right? Like, do you have an answer? Like, well, what would you say? Like,
how do you?
how would you speculate on mana? Like, what would you think of mana? Like.
I mean, it's an attribute on your character. It's meant to be a spend on the ritual, at least going forward now.
Sure.
So how we essentially present things to spend is going to be your indication, or the community's indication of the value of mana. But not to give out like another cop out answer, but again, right? It's like we're highly confident in ourselves. So like if you're here and believe in what we're doing, then just stick around, So that's as the simplest or lowest base value answer I can give you.
Yeah, and I think it's so obviously a lot of folks right now we haven't shipped the whole dang thing yet. Um, but I hope that the beauty is that because it's on chain, once we ship, it's shipped. As in, like, it's not a server that we would someday have to shut down because we
Yeah,
can't
I
pay the
mean,
bills, right?
actually,
Like,
it's not obvious. Like none of these characteristics of the permanence of what we're working on is obvious to a normal person looking at it until you
yeah,
understand what on-chain means. Because again, only 5% of all NFT people even have the mental distinction between the levels of on-chainness, right? And
yeah,
that is something we have to work with. But I think as we show more of these very unique character mechanics that only our project is able to do, people are going to be asking, well, what the hell is going on, And then we're probably going to get a research into discussion around those levels of on-chainness.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's gonna be good, right? I think, sure, we proved to the world that we could do on chain to the quality that we're doing it. But like for example, live servicing animations in the background,
Yeah,
not
I
even
mean,
just like a slap it on top. It's like it's sequenced into the
but
13 now layers that we have. Um, to do that is a really awesome. I think to have color shifting, like reskinning, change. I think the Great Decay is in some ways a great demonstration of liveness, where
yeah.
like you hit that refresh button, your decay is calculated on that block, like on that refresh, right? Like so that like everything is like bleeding edge. And I think there's going to be rituals that we can design that leans more
Yeah,
heavily.
explaining that to someone, it makes sense to us because we've been thinking about it constantly.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
first of all, people don't even know there's a refresh metadata button like a lot of times.
Yeah, yeah,
And, and then okay, so then you explain so okay, if you refresh that, you're gonna get new data, and you're like, okay, wait, so it's gonna be different every single time? So yes, because the block time increases, right? It's like it's a new block, right?
yeah,
And then explain that. So okay, wait, why is that? Because like we're computing the image live and all the metadata live, and they're like, so you have to have an understanding of how Ethereum works to some degree to even know what live means and
yeah.
what are we computing, where are we computing
I
it? It's like what's
I
going on here?
really wish for the future where it's just like OpenSea, just like we don't need the refresh button anymore.
Yeah,
Like it just that I feel like it's an artifact of the fact that most NFTs are static.
yeah.
I feel like the moment you hit the page, you should just be getting its latest version, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I hope that for the future,
But
that's
it's
not a concept we have to think
yeah.
about,
See,
right?
the thing is, I was with my friend last night, and and he's just starting to get into Solidity development. But I was explaining to him the concept of simulated transaction, the simulated, and
Yeah,
then
the
like
ETH
okay,
call, right?
and yeah, an econ. Then you have to walk through a bunch of shit, right? So first of all,
Yeah,
you have to understand it's like okay, we got the global computer of
yeah,
state. You're like okay, because we have global states, like mutating that requires network cost, right? The network transaction fee.
because you have to get everybody to agree, right?
Because you have to get everyone to change their data, not
Yeah,
just because you're actually changing data. So okay, get that concept in your brain. Then now okay, obviously there's also some functions in Solidity that we can call that don't do anything. It's like just adds two numbers, right? That doesn't change date. So then that
yeah,
allows you to simulate the transaction, which really what we mean is we're running it locally, which
yeah.
even saying locally is a dumb word because it's being run on a node in a server.
It's like
Yeah,
you say run locally, but then you're like, I thought you just said it's a global computer,
yeah,
and it's like,
exactly. Yeah.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
I feel like it's like
Complicated, dude, to explain like all these layers of things. Like,
it's like it's one of those things where the more you explain it, the more people's like,
yeah,
should I be caring anymore about
I feel like you
like
gotta draw it. You got or okay. So yeah, and explain that. So, okay, two at 2 plus 2. I don't need everyone to run that like computation, so I'm just gonna run it myself on my little box. And
yeah,
then okay, because you can do that, I can also fetch real time data and inject that into my computation. Whether that's like what time is it right now? What's your balance of your wallet? Whatever,
yeah,
anything that's read only, I can get that data. And then so okay, once I get to that point and it makes sense for him, he's like, oh shit, you can. That's completely different from anything else that people are aware of in terms of I fetch a file from a server, or I'm computing something on my website, or whatever. You know?
Yeah, and the beauty as it stands is anybody can run that simulation and expect the same output.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That is a really great beauty where it's so democratized in that way. Tangentially, I even want to bring up and ask is like, do you want to like? This is something we could totally do. Is like, you know how like on the, I assume you have seen the preview for like the little mono lines.
Yeah.
We could totally do is every time you hit the refresh button, the
Asking me,
mono.
I assume you saw the mana preview, as if like we don't share everything.
I know. I just wanted to double because I've sent you so many versions or variants. I was like, which one have I sent you? Right, like we can totally do is that you hit the refresh button and we just like we can literally make the lines just re-randomize where they are.
Yeah.
Like that's totally fair game. Like we could just use the block timestamp at the moment that you called it, and just say, all right, your lines were used to be 1, 2, 3 here. It could now be here, and or here. We can actually do that totally like right now, and demonstrate to people.
I think we should add as much dynamic.
I mean, what do you want to do it? If you want to do it, I'll literally add those lines of code like right after the pod, right? And once I'm finished, it'll be really. I think it'll be cool, right?
Yeah, but
their positions.
I mean, I think we're on a good train of thought here, as in like we got quite a intellectual. We have a lot of things to explain beyond just and I think, and then I was also talking to my friend, is like, actually, if you think about it, there's some beauty to the local computation, right? It's like very few things are operating in like a PlayStation or a console does, right? I mean, we take it for granted. You can put in a disc, you don't need an internet connection, and you can play that game. Like, not many things work like that. You can't do that with your phone. You can't do that with shit, right? So,
in some ways, I think it's interesting. They almost imply the metaphor that your NFT, being that if you have access to an EVM, that becomes like your console, right? Like we as NFT designers can assume that you all have EVMs around. That kind of metaphorically being that you all have Xboxes or PS5s, and we're building an NFT being the game. And, yeah, go ahead. And you being that you have NFTs kind of being like the game discs that we are distributing, publishing, selling, and putting them into your metaphorical consoles. So
yes, metaphorical consoles.
Right, I think that could be a way to shape the way to tell it, but even that is abstract to an extent, because even what is an EVM to most people, right? Like
it's your MetaMask connecting to something which most people don't even think about.
yeah, and it's in the EVMs that we most of us all
explain
use.
that, right? I had to explain that also too. He's like, wait a second. So when I use a wallet, what node am I using then? He's like, wait, so there's a node every single time? And he's like, yeah. So, and I was like, so and I explained to him, so who's doing the computation? I was like, oh, well, actually they just do for free for some reason right now. It's like, forget that part, right? It's free.
I feel like whenever I explain something, I'm like, forget that part. I already lost them. Like it's like, but yeah, I mean, like, relatively speaking, you know, like doing these EVM computations, like the opcodes, if you run it like close to metal, they're negligible on your electricity or AWS costs. So I think that's why it's free.
It makes sense why it's the way it is now, but if you're explaining it to someone, right, it's like everything is like a logical thing. So, and then once you introduce the concept of free, then it's like, oh, that's a whole extra wild card that's thrown into this eco.
Yeah. And like, you know, I think we're the one of the first few guys who really are trying to exploit the fact that this simulation call is like almost like a cheat code to how much you can do on the blockchain.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think at this point with the mana animations, we're going to be cracking nearly 140, 150 million gas. 140 probably more accurately. Which again, a block is about 30 to 40 million gas. A single, like a block on the blockchain. That means that we're doing how many like blocks worth of work just to make one NFTs look the way it looks, right?
Yeah.
But again, it's free. right? Because we're not, it's just a simulation, right? The whole world is like, I was gonna make a Matrix reference, but then I forgot the reference to make, so I'm not gonna make a Matrix reference.
Do you have an estimate on how much terraforms would have taken?
I can simulate it and see, but my ballpark would be about 50 to 75.
Oh,
They
really?
do quite a bit of strings. It's more, I just don't know exactly how expensive their noise function is, because they do use a noise function to kind of populate your world with with the characters. If that's very expensive, we can be talking a lot more. But just for the string interpolations, we're not talking too much, because as an SVG, and they actually offload so much of the work into other things. And then I think, curious enough, if you actually note, if you go look at their actual metadata, so the image is a SVG on chain, but the animation URL goes to a Web2 domain.
Really, for terraforms?
Yeah, I just checked it recently, and you feel free to double check if I'm speaking out my ass here. So as I understand, what you see on OpenSea is the animation URL, implying that, which is cached and implying that that is off chain. But the image part of the metadata, which is just a static SVG that doesn't have its animation that Terraform has, that is actually on chain.
So I mean, I guess one of the differences I'm looking at is like when you're looking at a grid of tiles on OpenSea versus visiting the page, which is loading. So for the grid, it's loading animation URL, a cached image that's static.
No, it's loading whatever they have cached, which is either animation URL or the image. I think they have precedent over the animation URL first.
Okay.
And then the whatever you call it, the image. Yeah. Because if you actually go to, like, for us in our case, if we go to our OpenSea page and you right click in onto any of those gridded NFTs, they're literally our SVGs.
Yeah.
Like, they're not like PNG screenshotting it or rasterizing it in any particular way. It's literally just what we gave them cached.
Yeah. So that's also what I'm trying to understand. What is the purpose of pointing to a domain for Terraform?
I just think that maybe they haven't figured out how to do the whole animation part on chain as well. Like, they couldn't figure out maybe how to do this whole HTML part on chain. They only did the SVG part on chain, where it's like a static image without the animation, without the JavaScript.
Okay. I thought they were sending down a whole HTML page.
Well, I'm double checking right now. I literally am going onto their.
They do have the JS script in Solidity, so it's like
yeah, that's what I thought too, right? So let me see if I'm just speaking on my ass right now. So I'm putting in token URL right now.
Confusing two projects.
Okay, so I do get a massive JSON dump. So I'm gonna put it in here. So okay, yes, animation URL does point to a HTTPS URL.
Interesting.
Let me see if we can share my screen.
Beep up.
And then how to produce? Okay.
Okay, yeah, you're good.
Okay, so this is the massive dump. So, like, beyond that, you should not be seeing this. Oh Lord. Okay. So here, name, description, and an animation URL. This is what's actually your NFT, right? Like, this is the animating, and you can see here, this specifically is a HTML URL. If I hit it, and that's your animation. So this is the animation URL, right? Which is a Web2 domain, and this is your on-chain SVG. So let's copy and paste this. God, I'm bad at this right now. And this is this is the on-chain URL here for the SVG. So you can see that it's not animated, whereas this is animated. So this is Web2, this is on-chain. And so that would imply that terraforms, what you're seeing here, this is not on-chain.
Shit. Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I really thought this some reason they were constructing a whole HTML page and sending.
Yeah,
it
I
out.
thought so too. I thought so too, right? But unfortunately, I guess they're not doing that. So,
Okay. Well.
yeah. Well, more food for thought. More, you know.
Yeah.
um,
But I mean, don't you think they could have fit all that stuff into? They could have sent down a whole HTML page. It would have been just as.
they probably could.
I mean, just slightly more work than all the stuff they already did, right? Or maybe it's because they developed in HTML.
Well, okay. So this gets complex here because it's if you look at the HTML, it's really just an SVG with a foreign object in it.
Yeah.
So they could have totally done that. Maybe they know something we don't know, but like this it's a little bit curious that they're not serving in
And what is the
maybe it's because maybe it's because animation URL you can't do a base 64 encoding, and this is like a temporary workaround that they have to do because OpenSea doesn't support just like raw dumping an HTML into that.
Oh, so
key value.
That's OpenSea's problem then.
Yeah, then I would. Yeah, I guess it would be their problem, right? So let's see if there's a token HTML. Okay, so if I call this function,
if you might get the HTML, that would be sick. Okay,
if that's the case and should be on chain, then what they are doing is actually purely just because OpenSea is being a dick. Okay, so this is the freaking HTML.
Okay, sweet. Okay, that's sick. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, so then yeah. Okay, so then
it's calling that function basically. They just have a page that's calling that and it's sending it.
Yeah, because I guess just simply because they need a proxy right now for OpenSea, which is unfortunate that that we need to do that, but good to know because it was like we would have had to fall under this trap if we did do animation URL stuff. But that's interesting.
Now we know for HTML world though. This is good to know.
Yeah. Well, good to know, right? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Yeah, I was just like I was like having a question of faith there. I was just like I love terraforms and I was like, oh, you guys didn't just scam me, did you guys? I'm like, I know you guys were better, and they are better. I mean, those guys are still awesome. So
looking forward to whatever they do next. Hopefully they're probably just waiting for another bull market.
I'm certain they're maybe quiet working on something. Like they do really thoughtful work. So yeah, we'll hope that something interesting comes to form.
But I think we should call it. I think we talked about a lot of good stuff pretty much.
Yeah, let's call it today. It's a good chat.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I think we're gonna keep putting out more information on Discord and Twitter, but if anything, this conversation should indicate basically a large where our minds are and then the direction of the studio for the short-term future. So
yeah, 100%.